Welcome to the Church of Perpetual Life, and my name is Neal Vandery. I am your officiator here at the church, and I welcome you to our service, which is live streamed and zoomed live from our church here in Pompano Beach. If this is your first time joining us at Perpetual Life, I'd like to invite you to join the list so that you can get updates on all that is going on in the super longevity community so that you may live a longer and healthier life. Join our mailing list simply by emailing me through the website at perpetual.life. Our service next month is a hybrid with in-person and online services on Thursday, March 25th, with our physical doors opening here at 6 p.m. and Zoom beginning at 6 p.m. as well. And the main event will begin at 7 p.m. So here we are having an event in person. It'll be through Zoom, it'll be through live stream, YouTube, as well as in Tanya's metaverse. Tonight, we have an excellent presentation for you, Dr. Robert Lufkin. But first, join me in the recitation of our creed. Our creed here at the Church of Perpetual Life, we believe that all of life is sacred and that we have been given this one life to make unlimited. We believe in our Creator's divine plan for all of humanity to have infinite lifespans in perfect health and eternal joy, rendering death to be optional. By following our gospel, we achieve eternal life, creating a heaven here on earth. We follow Nikolai Fedorov, who taught that the transcendence of the Creator will be solved when humanity, in our unified efforts, become an instrument of universal resuscitation, when the divine word becomes our divine action. And we follow Arthur C. Clarke, who said, the only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. And so we enter each day energized in spirit and empowered by the words of our prophets, serving our Creator and all of mankind forever and ever. Now, what about cryonics? If you're curious about cryonics, email me or text me. We have a great number of resources on cryonics here at the Church of Perpetual Life. I'll be very happy to get you information about that. Online, if you'd like to make a donation, you'll find a donation link at the top of our website, and we're always thankful for your donations. They help us to have future better presentations. Tonight, we are lucky to have Dr. Robert Lufkin to give a presentation, Improving Longevity for People. Please make note of your questions for our speaker tonight, as we will have a short questions and answer period after his presentation. Dr. Lufkin has served as full professors at both UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine and the USC Keck School of Medicine, with a current academic focus on the applied science of longevity. In addition to being a practicing physician, he is author to over 200 peer-reviewed scientific papers, 32 book chapters, and 13 books available in 6 languages. Dr. Lufkin has studied computer science at Brown University and completed his medical degree at the University of Virginia. Dr. Lufkin has given invited lecture keynotes around the world and was named one of the 100 most creative people in Los Angeles by Buzz Magazine. He spoke at last year's RADFest also. His honors include serving as president of the Society of Magnetic Resonance Imaging, president of the American Society of Head and Neck Radiology, and numerous other professional affiliations. Among his many inventions include several patents and in artificial intelligence. He developed also an MR-compatible biopsy needle, which is used worldwide today as the Lufkin needle. Please help me welcome now Dr. Robert Lufkin.
Thanks so much, Neal. It's a true pleasure to be here and get together with such a wonderful community you have. I can feel the warmth in the audience and all of you in speaking a little bit earlier when we were all getting together. It's great to be here today. I get to talk about one of my favorite topics. it's about longevity. And as everybody in this audience knows, longevity science we're in a unique time. It's expanding like never before, as evidenced by conferences like this and get-togethers. For the first time, it's possible to even have a conversation about credible anti-aging drugs and also lifestyle choices that can have significant effects on inflammation and longevity. And that's what we're going to do today. But before I do, I just want to make a couple disclosures. I'm a medical doctor, but this is not medical advice. This is only for the purposes of education. And although I've spent my career as a professor at either UCLA or USC medical schools in Los Angeles, the opinions you're about to hear are my own, and I'm not speaking for the institutions. I have, as far as financial conflicts, I make no money from sales of drugs like rapamycin in here. I do run teaching programs about lifestyle, though, and have a book coming out that will generate revenue as well. The objectives for today are, as the title says, we're going to look deeply at improving longevity, and some of the choices we have, what we are going to do lifestyle or we're going to do a pill, or what's the best way to do it. And I'm going to, as I talk about these things, I'm going to review the mechanisms of longevity, at least the way I've conceptualized them, and then what happens then when we turn down aging, and how lifestyle and how drugs can do it, and then what the trade-offs are for both of them. And I'm going to heavily reference any of the comments I make, hopefully with peer-reviewed papers whenever possible. But just so you don't have to copy them down, here's a QR code that will link to copies of these slides. And I'm going to, if I'm going to have this QR code at the end. So if you're not sure you want to copy the slides now, I'll also show this at the end, so you'll be able to get that if you'd like. So I'm going to start with inflammation, because inflammation, in my mind, is one of the key factors of aging. And inflammation, first of all, it's our body's normal, healthy response to help heal attack from foreign material. So inflammation can be a good thing. For example, when a foreign material like a thorn or even food enters our body, inflammation is the healthy response to that. And that's called acute inflammation. And we learned about this, and I still teach it in medical school, that inflammation is described by these 4 Latin words over 2,000 years ago: calor, calorie, which is warmth; dolor is pain; rubor is redness; and tumor is swelling. What also happens with inflammation is it increases with aging. So CRP is a test we can do that's shown here on this graph, and this C-reactive protein increases as we age, and it reflects that as we get older and older, we get more and more of this inflammation. And the type of inflammation associated with aging is chronic inflammation. It's inflammation that's turned on all the time and never stops. And what we see is, the older we are, the higher these levels of C-reactive protein become, until in the 70s, it's very high like this. And this is key because inflammation is one of the main drivers of essentially all the chronic diseases that are going to kill 80 to 90% of us, assuming we don't live forever. So inflammation and 2 other things we'll be discussing, insulin resistance and metabolic disease, are all the drivers, in my opinion, of longevity. And we'll see what happens when we turn these down, and if we can actually slow these things with not only a pill, but also with lifestyle. And importantly, modern medicine, the drugs and surgery we use to treat heart disease or stroke or cancer or hypertension or any of these things, really just treats the symptoms. And if we want to really get to the root cause, we have to look at inflammation and insulin resistance. And that's what we'll do when we look at these approaches to longevity. So to do that, I want to introduce a concept, and this is what we're going to be targeting. It's a primitive master controller switch. that is conserved across organisms over billions of years. It's literally present all the way from yeast to human beings. And it's fascinating because this switch, despite its importance, it wasn't even discovered till almost the end of the 20th century. And the switch does one thing, arguably the single most essential function for all life that we all share, and that's survival. And it really does one thing. It detects the presence of nutrients. And if nutrients are not present, it switches, like here, to what's called repair mode. And if nutrients are present, it switches to growth mode. And this is very key for survival, because you can imagine if an organism gets this wrong, then it won't survive. In other words, if there are no nutrients and the organism begins to grow, then it will die. On the other hand, if there are nutrients and it doesn't grow, it's a missed opportunity. And yes, this is very similar to, we'll be talking, it's a similar in concept to the metabolic switch of the book of the same name. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So let's understand the survival switch a little bit more and talk about what nutrients does it detect. Well, it detects basic nutrients like glucose, a couple amino acids called branch chain amino acids, things like oxygen, and then also a hormone called insulin. So how does this all tie into this inflammation, repair, all these factors? Well, what happens is when it switches between grow and repair modes, it also switches between inflammation and autophagy. Inflammation is necessary to protect the body when food is entering the body, because food is a foreign material. So it's a healthy response. And when grow mode is turned on, inflammation is turned on. When food is not present, repair mode is turned on. And this is autophagy, which you may have heard about as one of the longevity tools that we use in a number of ways. So repair is good when it helps repair the body, but we don't want to do either growth or repair all the time. We want to have a balance of this. And nobody really knows how this switch works, but scientists speculate that as we evolved, this switch, all the way from yeast to modern humans, would alternate between grow and repair. And that's how our organisms functioned. And if you think about it, the basic human state for the last 100,000 years or more is that it alternates between grow and repair. Now, some experts are speculating that in the last 10,000 years, especially with the agricultural revolution, which allowed foods to be cultivated and stored, which meant we could eat more continuously, there was less time in repair mode and more time in the growth mode and the inflammation mode. This got even worse about 200 years ago when refrigeration was invented, and then food was available essentially all the time. And then about 30 years ago, when junk food production really stepped up in the 1980s, we have humans now that some people eat for 24 hours a day and turn this survival switch to growth and inflammation all the time. Now, this is bad for a couple of reasons. Let's look at theories of aging. The main theory of aging that most people still subscribe to is that aging is like wear and tear. It's like my car. It wears out, it breaks down, eventually that's it. And if we think about some aspects of aging, like wrinkles, gray hair, and all these things, that's self-evident that some sort of wear and tear is going on. But it's interesting, what we look at the diseases that determine our longevity and literally cause our death, there are really only about 4 of them that represent 90% of what we will die of. And that's basically heart disease, stroke, cancer, and Alzheimer's disease. And when we look at these diseases that determine longevity, it's not like that we wear out. When somebody has a heart attack, it's not that their heart wears out. Actually, they get hypertrophy and overgrowth of the blood vessels leading to the heart or to the brain in the case of a stroke. Cancer, for example, is hypertrophy and overproduction of cells of neoplastic growth. And even Alzheimer's disease, which we're still struggling to understand, it's not that the brain wears out with Alzheimer's disease, and the dementia of Alzheimer's disease is actually caused by inflammation and a hyperplastic reaction to foreign material in the brain. So there are really two theories of aging, the wear and tear, but also people are beginning to think about hyperfunction as a cause of aging. And so we can keep both of these in mind. Fortunately, when we look at this switch, by turning the switch off from growth into repair, we're addressing both of these models of inflammation, of aging. So what happens when we turn the switch down to this repair mode and we slow growth? In particular, what happens to the phenotypes of aging, the diseases of aging, and then next and last, we're going to look at longevity itself. Now, in order to show the effects and test this switch, we need to have a tool that will act on it. And as many of you know, this switch is actually called mTOR or TOR, T-O-R. And it's named for the drug that led to its discovery, which is rapamycin. And the TOR stands for target of rapamycin. And rapamycin, again, as many of you know, is a magical drug with an even more magical origin story that started in 1962 in the island of Rapa Nui, for which it was named. And you can check out a beautiful Radiolab piece on that tells the origin story. But it's pretty amazing. So let's buckle up now and see what happens when we turn this longevity switch into anti-aging mode with this drug. So first of all, I want to bring our attention to the phenotypes of aging. These are the most obvious outward signs of old age that a child would recognize. You know, wrinkles, gray hair, maybe loss of hair. And these are obviously caused by wear and tear. So if this switch affects aging, we should see something happen to these phenotypes of aging when we give this drug, rapamycin, which turns this switch off. So let's see. Here, first of all, let's look at hair changes. Now, this is not a human study here. This is and it's an imperfect model in the mouse, and it's not exactly aging. But what they found was that when they gave these mice in this model for hair growth, they found that the mice that were given the rapamycin, interestingly enough, and we turned the TOR switch down, the hair growth increased pretty dramatically there. And the other thing that happened was the color actually got darker. So the gray hair reversed. And here's the H&E stains. These are the control mice, which show the hair is gone. These are the rapamycin treated mice. The hair is back, and it's back with its natural color. So these are hair changes. What else? Skin changes. This is perhaps the most obvious thing. This is actually a human study that was done turning back mTOR and with rapamycin. These were very brave volunteers who, it was only 6 patients, but they were treated in a controlled prospective style where they were blinded to the creams they used. One hand, they put one cream on it. The other hand, they put another cream. One cream had rapamycin. The other cream just had a skin lotion on it. And what happened at the end, they actually consented to punch biopsies of the skin where they took these samples that we're looking at here, and they looked at skin tone and collagen, which are the familiar markers for aging. And what we can see is in the placebo side here, this layer 7 collagen layer is absent, but with rapamycin, it's returning. And we actually see improved skin tone and collagen in the rapamycin treated skin. And this was just with 6 months of skin cream. And actually, about literally 12 months ago in April 2022, the FDA approved rapamycin hand cream, not for anti-aging, but they approved it for angiofibromas from a disease called tuberous sclerosis. But Now that it's available, people may begin using it to see these hand changes. Here's another disease that's associated with aging, periodontal disease. It's a common marker for aging. And, our stereotypes of old people are toothless, for a reason. Here's an animal model of periodontal disease. And if you see on the graph here, this distance here measures the severity of periodontal disease. You can literally measure this distance here. Young mice, they have very little resorption here. With adult mice, it increases more, but then old mice have this marked resorption of bone around here. When these old mice were treated with 8 weeks of rapamycin, they had marked improvement of periodontal disease. And you can see that it's not returned to the youth size, but it's definitely improved with old age. So with all these applications of turning mTOR down with this rapamycin, we're seeing positive findings on the age spectrum. And Matt Kaberlein, I think, who spoke to this group a few months ago, and Dr. Ahn are investigating this periodontal disease response to rapamycin at the University of Washington. They currently have a human study underway. And if you're curious, yes, patents for rapamycin toothpaste have already been filed. Hearing loss, one more thing associated with old age. I mean, even if you manage to skip out on those Led Zeppelin concerts in your youth, hearing loss is still associated with aging. In fact, age-related hearing loss affects about a third of the people over the age of 65 and half of those over 75. So in this is an animal study where they look at literally the hair cells of the cochlea, which is the hearing organ for rapamycin, where hearing loss occurs. And they're able to show, as you can see by the curves, the blue line here without rapamycin has greater cochlear hair cell, which is correlated with hearing loss, compared to the red line, which is the rapamycin treated animals. So one thing after another: skin, hair, teeth, hearing. Let's look at another phenotype of aging. Some people don't think of a phenotype of aging because it only affects half the population, but that half, it affects 100%. It's known as ovarian failure, or more commonly known as menopause, which is a sign of aging. If you live long enough, you will get menopause as a female. The fascinating and what happens is this is an animal study, but it's in mice. As you can see here, this is a group without rapamycin, and then the red line is with rapamycin. And this shows the number of pups per litter that the females are getting. And then on the graph on the right, it's showing that the controls have, as they get older and older, they have fewer and fewer pups, lower fertility. But when they're given rapamycin, it actually improves their fertility. It delays the onset of menopause for these mouse models. And now human studies are being underway. So the fascinating thing about reversing all these phenotypes of aging is, although they make the person look younger, fewer wrinkles, maybe, less baldness, they don't directly affect their longevity. It's sort of, the dirty little secret about all the patients taking Botox or getting hair transplants is that they look younger, but they actually don't live any longer. And that's because nobody dies of wrinkles or gray hair or even menopause. Nobody really dies of old age. And what we mentioned earlier, what people die of are specific diseases of longevity. And you can go to the statistics like we see here, and you can tell exactly which ones they are. Mostly heart disease and cancer, but also we're going to look at stroke and Alzheimer's disease. These are the things that are going to kill us and most of the people we've ever met. So let's look at, and as we get older, the risk factor for these increases. In fact, if you're a 70-year-old, you're more likely to die of lung cancer, a non-smoking 70-year-old, than a 30-year-old who smokes 4 packs of cigarettes a day. it's something to think about. All these risks increase with aging. So let's now look at rapamycin, this drug, and see if turning the switch affects any of these diseases. It works on the phenotypes of aging, at least it appears to in animal models. What happens with the actual diseases that kill us? Well, the number one I mentioned is cardiovascular disease, no question. And cardiovascular disease, as you probably know, is caused by a hyperplasia, a kind of accelerated growth of the blood vessel walls that narrow the blood vessels. And if it narrows the blood, it keeps blood getting to the heart, you have a heart attack. If it happens to your brain, you have a stroke. If it happens to your kidneys, you have renal failure, and on and on and on. It can go on all over your body. So, and the treatment for, let's say, a heart attack is to place a stent in. It used to be open heart surgery, but now more and more it's a stent. And a stent just kind of opens up the blood vessel, which allows blood to flow into the heart. And some people get these stents and they go, wow, I had a heart attack and I went to the hospital and I got a stent. So I'm cured, I'm fixed. What they don't understand is these stents, in fact, most of the drugs and pills and surgery that were given for these chronic diseases only affect the acute symptoms, and the underlying root cause, things like inflammation, insulin resistance, and metabolic disease, are not affected. So the stent will hold open this blood vessel, but the rest of the blood vessels in the body will continue to narrow. In fact, even the stents will tend to clot off. And back to rapamycin and turning off the mTOR switch, rapamycin received FDA approval in 2003 and then later in 2021 as a coating for these stents, because when you coat these stents with rapamycin and turn down mTOR, the atherosclerosis is slowed and it keeps it from coming back. So rapamycin appears to have a beneficial effect, and it's FDA approved for cardiovascular disease in this specific application. What about cancer? Cancer is hypertrophy. Does mTOR do anything for cancer, resetting this mTOR switch? Well, it's interesting. The greatest risk of heart transplants in the first 5 years after you get a transplant is not rejection, but actually a malignancy that occurs, because the drugs used for rejection can increase the rate of cancer. And there are two types of drugs that can be used for rejection. And it happens that rapamycin is one of the drugs that's FDA approved for it. And what people began to notice was these are survival curves of patients after heart transplants, the number of years going out. And the blue curve is the people who got the non-rapamycin treatment, and the red curve is the people who got the rapamycin treatment. And what you can see, it's very obvious that people who got rapamycin had many fewer cancers in this heart transplant situation. But it's not just heart transplants. Rapamycin and some of its analogs, other types of rapamycin type drugs, are now FDA approved for 8 different types of cancers as primary treatment. So renal cell carcinoma, metastatic disease, rapamycin is confirmed for that, and several others. So now there's evidence that flipping the switch, this metabolic longevity switch, this survival switch, can actually improve cancer statistics. Last one I'll mention is Alzheimer's disease. That represents our ultimate failure of modern medicine, because we don't even really understand how Alzheimer's disease works. And as evidence of that, there's not a single drug available today that actually improves the patient's disease. Some of them will slow the decline slightly, but the results are just extremely discouraging. So if this rapamycin is so wonderful for the phenotypes of aging, and it has positive effects on these other diseases that determine our longevity, what happens when we apply rapamycin to Alzheimer's disease and turn that metabolic switch from growth back to repair and autophagy mode? Well, it's very interesting. This is an animal model of Alzheimer's disease in the mouse. So it's not a human study, but this is an animal model called Mouseheimer's disease. It gets the very similar disease as human Alzheimer's disease. It affects the hippocampus, a part of the brain in the mouse, just like it does in the humans. And on this graph, you can see WT means wild type mice, and they do pretty well with this contextual memory test. As we know, Alzheimer's disease cripples the memory, and that's one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, this dementia that you get. Well, now, this is the Alzheimer's model, and this Alzheimer's model in the mice does very poorly with memory. Now, the interesting thing is when the Alzheimer's model is given rapamycin, the memory function, as shown by this hippocampal dependent contextual memory testing, returns almost to the level of the non-Alzheimer's disease mice. And there are a number of reasons why this would work. But it's very, very exciting to the point that there's now a human trial from the University of Texas using rapamycin for Alzheimer's disease as one of the possible treatments there. Well, that's great, you say. Turning back this mTOR switch slows the phenotypes of aging. It slows these chronic diseases, but does it really lengthen our lives? What's the evidence, if any, that it changes longevity? Well, for humans, there really is no evidence because it's very, very difficult to do longevity research on humans. But there are a number of powerful testing strategies throughout the animal kingdom. Probably the most powerful one and the most interesting one is one run by the National Institutes of Health. It's paid for with taxpayers' dollar. It's called the Interventions Testing Program. And it's a wonderful program. It's been around since, I think it started in 2002, and it allows us, the public, to suggest things to test for longevity. And what they do is they have a standard animal model for longevity, which is the mouse model, which is great because mice only live about 3 years. So you can actually take the mice, divide them into two groups, let one group live normally, and the other group, you give them the drug or the nutrient or the supplement and see what happens. Do they live longer? Do they live shorter? And that's all it does is test this one intervention. And it's even done at 3 different laboratories around the country. So a number of what's been tested so far, people have written in and suggested, so things like resveratrol, fish oil, ashwagandha, fisetin, NAD supplements like nicotine riboside, metformin, green tea extract, methylene blue, MitoQ, even statins have been tested. And unfortunately, none of those had any longevity effects on the mice. Now, one caveat is just because a drug fails the ITP program doesn't mean it doesn't work. It means it doesn't work at that dose. In other words, it may be too low a dose or too high a dose. But the interesting question is, did any drug actually lengthen the lifespan of these mice? And here are some that did actually. Aspirin did, only in males and to a small amount, no effect in females. NGA, which is an anti-inflammatory drug, turned it up in males, but no females. Estradiol, males, but no females. Acarbose is a drug, it's a diabetes drug that blocks absorption of carbohydrates and glucose from your gut. Actually had a decent gain in males and a less significant gain in females. But you're probably asking, what happens? Why don't we use an mTOR blocking drug like rapamycin? What happens when we give the ITP rats or ITP mice rapamycin? And what happened was, it's really remarkable. Rapamycin, more than any drug tested, consistently improved longevity in both males and females more than any other drug. And interestingly, due to a technical snafu, the first time this was reported back in 2009, shown here, they didn't start the drug until the mice were in middle to old age. So the mice were the equivalent of humans in their 60s and 70s when they started the rapamycin, yet they still got this dramatic effect, because some of these drugs you have to give for the whole lifetime of the animal. So it's pretty remarkable. So back to the topic of this presentation. So what have we seen so far? Well, it appears that this master metabolic switch that's in essentially all animals from yeast to all the way to humans, turning it from growth mode and inflammation mode back to repair mode, autophagy, has powerful effects. So what's the best way to do it? Okay, so we've seen the drug effects, but let's talk about lifestyle effects on mTOR. Lifestyle effects, I'm going to be completely honest here, they're challenging because unlike rapamycin, it's difficult to understand which lifestyle effect specifically turns down mTOR because of the multitude of pathways that lifestyle effects work on. Nonetheless, because of what we know about this switch and how it works, like we've talked about, you're probably already thinking of a few things in lifestyle that will turn this switch down. So, well, first of all, the primary job is nutrient sensing, right? When it senses nutrients, it turns on. So, as Jason Fung famously observed, the one thing that all religious leaders agree on, all the way from Jesus, Moses, Allah, the Buddha, and practically all the gods of Hinduism, is that it's not a point of religious doctrine that they agree on, but rather they agree that the simple lifestyle advice is that fasting is good for you. In fact, caloric restriction is the single most reliable tool to increase longevity across species. It's just, it may be very healthy for us, but it's hard to do, and you can only do it for so long. But experts believe we can get the same effects on mTOR by just minimizing the eating window. And so instead of getting up in the morning and have a big breakfast and then snacking all day long, have dinner, and then snacking until you go to sleep, what experts now believe, and what I do myself, is I started without trying not to eat any more than 12 hours a day. And then next I dropped breakfast, and then I dropped lunch. And now I basically eat one meal a day when my kids come home from school. And I've never felt better. So I think the take home message with turning down mTOR is to try to narrow the eating window. Start with 12 hours, see if that works, and see if you can do that. Now, in addition to narrowing the eating window, you can cut down on specific macronutrients that turns on mTOR, because it's not all foods. There are 3 macronutrients: fat, proteins, and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are non-essential, and glucose from the carbohydrates is the #1 factor for turning on mTOR. The amino acids are a smaller effect. So if you want to cut out one thing, cut out junk foods, which are largely made up of large amounts of carbohydrates. So what does it look like in a diet? You can be either vegan all the way to carnivore. That doesn't really matter. It's just you need to avoid turning on mTOR, and that's avoiding the carbohydrates. So, that's a low carb keto style diet. The other factor that I'll end with in lifestyle that drives mTOR, in addition to the food, is this insulin. And this insulin is a sensor for food, but many other things we do in our lifestyle affect insulin. And this is a marker some of you have heard of for insulin. It's called HA1C, hemoglobin A1C. It's a marker for diabetes. And with aging, you can see these are not diabetic patients. These are just normal patients as they age. And we can see that our HA1C, or our abnormal risk for diabetes, increases. And there's more and more evidence that diabetes and insulin resistance is like gray hair. Basically, we're all going to get it if we live long enough. So we need to watch out for these things. So you can lower this insulin resistance. You can lower your insulin by, in addition to the nutritional things, but you can make sure your sleep, you get good quantity and good quality, lower your stress and exercise. And there's, all these lifestyle things all work towards turning mTOR down and basically doing what rapamycin does. But, it seems like, I don't know about you, I'm basically lazy. It seems like a lot of work to do all this lifestyle stuff. I'm saying, hey, if a pill does it, just give me the pill, And if rapamycin's so powerful, why not just use that and then eat what I want and live whatever lifestyle I want? Well, the problem is, first of all, we don't have a clue how this stuff really works. I've cited many papers, but I would argue that probably most people in this audience won't even agree on the mechanisms of aging. So, and what causes longevity. So sure, rapamycin is magical, but there's some red flags that indicate there's a lot more to this story that we haven't heard yet, that we're just beginning to tell. So here's back to the ITP data. Something happened when this paper came out in 2016. They found that a drug called metformin, that maybe you've heard of, which actually failed the ITP and had no benefit on longevity in the mice. When metformin was combined with rapamycin, shown here and here, it actually dramatically increased the lifespan of the males and females longer than rapamycin alone. So what's going on? It sounds like rapamycin's not the whole story, and it's not as simple as a pill. And then literally just a few months ago, another study from the ITP combined here's metformin and rapamycin. And this time they combined rapamycin with a drug called acarbose, and its effect is more than metformin and rapamycin, and it's even stronger effect. So we're beginning to understand there's a lot of things going on here. So what's the best approach? I mean, in my opinion, nobody really knows. First of all, though, this is the way I look at it. The argument, the risk of rapamycin is relatively low, although you do need to have a doctor's prescription. So you should be under the care of a physician for it. Secondly, the lifestyle changes that lower mTOR, and they also benefit inflammation. They lower your risk for all those chronic diseases in many, many other ways than just turning down mTOR. And finally, since aging is 100% fatal disease for essentially all of us, I'm going to hedge my bets. So this is what I do. Remembering this is not a medical advice, but this is education about what this poor pilgrim does. And remembering that actual mileage may vary, objects in the mirror may appear closer than they seem. But personally, I don't trust my life with either one separately. So what I do is I combine extremely aggressive lifestyle approaches with rapamycin. So one thing I do know for sure is that we're in the beginning of a revolution, just the beginning, but it's like nothing before in our understanding of longevity medicine. Breakthroughs are literally coming out every day. So whatever happens, I'm certain that the best is yet to come. So please stay tuned. I promise this link to my slides at the end for anybody who wants the copy or wasn't able to get it now. So at this point, I can take a few questions.
The first question from Jay Cryon. Joe, let's bring Joe up to ask a question.
Hi. And
Hi,
thanks
Joe.
for taking the question. Actually, I have two questions. One is, not that long ago, there was the idea that we should graze, eat little bits all day long. Why was this thought a good idea at the time, given that it seems the opposite is really beneficial? Second question, as part of studying and treating what they think I have, which is long COVID, I was found to have what they called an M spike, I guess protein in the blood. And I was told this indicates inflammation, but because of my family history, they want to test me every 6 months to ensure it doesn't develop into something more nefarious. But I was also told that this blood test is not normally given to people. So my question is, would it be advisable to test people regularly for this, number one? And number two, what does it actually mean?
Okay. First question about grazing all the time. I have to confess, I was raised in an environment where my mom was a dietitian. So I was told to eat, 3 meals a day and snack in between the meals. That was healthy. Don't go long without food. I was also told to eat low fat diet. We ate margarine full of seed oils and trans fats instead of butter. We avoided saturated fats. The thinking on this has all changed. And largely in part because of the research on understanding mTOR and inflammation, and the idea that maybe eating all the time is not such a good idea. Now, there are plenty of intelligent people that still disagree with this, and this is still a very controversial opinion, and it's amazing that, you know, we can put people on the moon, but we can't agree on what they should eat there, you know. So nutrition science, there's a lot of different opinions, but yeah. And then to your question with the testing, personally, I think more testing is better. There's a great company called Illo out of Y Combinator up in Stanford. They have a blood test that's fairly inexpensive. You can do it at home, and it delivers 500 metabolomics markers, and it's so many markers that we don't even know what they mean or what to do with them. But as far as your test, I mean, I would follow what the doctor recommends. I don't know what the specific test is, or, you know, what the cost is and everything. But personally, I'm a biohacker. I'm an explorer. I want to understand as much as I can. You've heard of CGMs, right? Continuous glucose monitors. Some of you have heard of those that you wear. I just got a CKM. It's a continuous ketone monitor that a company is testing that you put on your arm there. And, so I would, again, follow your doctor's advice, but always check with Google and what you can teach yourself to that as well. But yeah.
Yeah, there's no question I'll follow the doctor's advice on this and do the testing. That wasn't my question. My question was really more, is this an idea, this type of test? I don't know what it means. Simply indicates inflammation. And so since inflammation can be something that can be problematic, is it worth doing this? Or, if we're going to try and avoid inflammation anyway, does the test, for me, it may have a particular benefit, but for ordinary people, would it benefit them to know if there's some kind of inflammation going on in their body? Or should we be doing the same things anyway, whether we get this test that shows that or not?
Personally, I think it's important for everyone to follow their inflammation and track it. And we showed that graph in the beginning with C-reactive protein, which is one of the main markers for inflammation. We all have inflammation, chronic inflammation, increasing. The older we get, the more inflammation. So those are, I would recommend testing those. There are a number of tests. Unfortunately, there's not one test for inflammation. Inflammation is a broad area involving, cytokines and immune response. And so it's not just C-reactive proteins. It's like homocysteine, it's ferritin, it's serum cortisol can elevate with stress and some inflammation. And then insulin can respond to stress and in some cases inflammation as well. So everything's like interrelated there, and it's challenging for me as a physician to understand these things, and it's just very complex, and hopefully as we understand things better, we'll get some clarity with it.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Joe, for your question, and thank you, Doctor. I've got a question now from live stream, and this is coming from Alan, and he says, Dr. Lufkin, some people take periodic breaks from rapamycin, then they resume. Can you speak to that?
Sure. And the idea is, well, the real reason is nobody knows. Nobody knows what the best dose is. Nobody knows even, what the effective dose is, although there's some evidence from human trials that have been done in the past. But people are concerned that rapamycin is used as an immunosuppressant for short term. But at the doses taken for longevity, these effects don't occur, and actually you get immune enhancement. You improve your immune function and all. But the reason people do these intervals, taking breaks from rapamycin, is they think it's the best, and it may be the best. The real answer is nobody knows.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a question coming in. Let's see, Rudy. Rudy has a question. Let's bring Rudy up.
Okay, I'm doing the question live. You're not reading it. Yes, thanks, Dr. Lufkin. That was truly. I've attended a whole lot of COPL meetings, and this has been one of the very best. This is
Oh,
exactly
thank
what
you,
we've got to
Rudy.
be doing, trying to figure out what the science says about what's real in terms of nutraceuticals. And I'm just blown away by your presentation. But
Thank you.
one is a question about I take a boatload of nutraceuticals and not rapamycin yet, but right now metformin and generic Jardiance. And I'm wondering if I should, with those on the mornings I'm doing intermittent fasting, should I delay taking those vitamins and the metformin? And so that would the vitamins basically stop the reducing the mTOR factor, basically. So that's one question. The other question is, specifically what kind of biomarker tests you're doing. I know you addressed that briefly, but those the two questions. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. The question about, if I understand it correctly, about breaking your fast, do you avoid taking pills while you're fasting? Actually, I found that some pills have like a sugar base in them, or they have ingredients that are actually have a caloric value. So the idea with fasting is you don't want to have anything that has calories, but definitely not, glucose in there. So what I do when I take my pills, I usually take them in the afternoon around when I'm eating, and I don't take them in the morning because I've had sort of the similar thoughts as you. I'm fasting in the morning. I have a cup of black coffee and I, nurse that through the day, but I don't take the pills in the morning for that reason, just because I'm not sure what they're made up with. Sometimes they may have a caloric base in there. As far as the blood testing, I've discovered a great one that I use at home, and I recommend to people that are interested in exploring it. It's 17 biomarkers. It's from a company called Siphox, Siphox. And I think I've even got a discount if you use my name, but I can't remember what it is, but I can pass it to Neal later, or it may be on the website anyway. But it's if you buy it once a month, it's $100. If you buy it one off, it's like $230. But it's 17 biomarkers all the way, and you do it from a finger stick. So you can do it at home and mail it in anywhere in the U.S., I think, and Canada, except for New York State. But it's fasting cortisol, fasting insulin, HA1C, testosterone, DEHA, LDL, HDL, triglyceride, all sorts of things that you'd be curious about, homocysteine. So it's a great way just to look under the hood at your inflammation and metabolic panel as well.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lufkin. That was syfox.com.
No, it's SIPHOX.
Okay. They probably have a website.
Yes, they do. Yeah, syfox.com.
Outstanding. We all want to be data driven as possible. That's what was so compelling to me about your presentation. It's as data driven as we can get in our current state of ignorance about what works. And I respected how modest your claims were and how you let the data do the speaking. I thought that was cool.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Rudy. We have a question now from our live stream. And the question, it comes as a practical question from Rose. How can we ask our physician to prescribe rapamycin for this purpose? What is
you can just be honest with them and share and ask the question. Some physicians, some physicians are very reluctant to prescribe rapamycin because they don't understand it. They conceive of it. Its first FDA approval, as I mentioned, was for a immune suppression drug, and it still is a mainstream drug for renal transplants. So they're correctly frightened of it at that dosing schedule. But for longevity, it's a completely different dosing schedule. If they're not familiar with it, one, they can either say, I'll read up on it, or I'll talk to my colleagues, or you may have to find another physician. There's some online services that will actually prescribe it for you, so you can keep your other physician, but just get the rapamycin from another physician referral. But thank you for the question. It is challenging in that rapamycin is not well understood in the medical community. rapamycin for longevity.
Yes, yes. Hopefully it's getting more known for this purpose. We go now to Zoom with a question from Devin. Devin, we're going to bring you in now and you can ask your question.
Hey, I just wanted to ask if you do a really long daily fast, like, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
If you fast 16 or 18 hours a day, for instance, is it wise to take the rapamycin, at the end of the fast when you're about to break it, or during the fast? And also, if you combine it with metformin, I'm assuming that you don't get stomach issues from the metformin, because I don't. And also, I was thinking about something like a Jardians as well, and to introduce to my regimen. But as far as timing all of those things together, I just wanted to know if it was better to do it closer to like when you think of like the most food intake, like maybe the mTOR would be spiking at that point, and you want to reduce the total spike for that day when you take your weekly dose. I don't know if any of those things are actually important or not.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Like I mentioned before, for that reason and other reasons, I take the supplements and the pills usually during my meal, my meal in the afternoon.
Okay, we have a question from our live stream from Rose, and the question is there a comparison between dasatinib and rapamycin?
Yeah, dasatinib is a senolytic drug. It's like Fisetin or quercetin, which are over-the-counter versions. It's very powerful. It acts on slightly different mechanisms. It doesn't specifically target mTOR, but it targets senescent cells. And there's been some very exciting work looking at that. But it's a different mechanism than the mTOR with rapamycin.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I had one more question. Follow up. Yeah, if you take rapamycin and then also want to do a weekly or monthly senolytic, when's the best time to time that in conjunction with weekly rapamycin?
Good question. I'm going to have to plead the fifth, or not the fifth, but just plead ignorance on that. I don't have experience with it, and it's on my radar. I've been reading about dasatinib, but I don't have any recommendations from it. Alan Green is a physician who practices in New York. You just Google him. We had him on our podcast once, but he uses dasatinib and rapamycin in his practice with his patients. So if you just look at his material on the internet, and he has some great websites where he lays out his thinking on it, that might help you with that question. But I'm sorry, I don't have enough to really comment meaningfully on it. I don't have enough knowledge about it.
I got my protocol from Dr. Green's website that you mentioned.
Oh, okay.
And I take rapamycin one week and then dasatinib the following week, just alternate.
Okay.
Every other week. That's what Dr. Green recommends. My question for you, Dr. Lufkin, was I just wanted to comment that I share the philosophy that we're up against terminal aging, and it really pushes you in the direction of rationalizing, some pretty strong self medications, because what's the alternative? That's just a comment. My question is, what dosage of rapamycin do you use, and do you combine it with metformin or acarbose?
I take 1,500 milligrams of metformin. Metformin once a day, or I did long-acting tablets, and then I do rapamycin. I started at 6, and then I've gradually gone up to 10 once a week. And the issue is I haven't had any side effects from it, no aphthous ulcers or anything like that, or any other effects. And the problem with the drug is nobody knows what the effective dose is, and there are very few markers to tell if it's working, or getting into the cells that you need it to, or anything like that. But that's just that's the dose that based on Joan Manick's study that she did with the influenza patients, and then everyone sort of adopted that, and Alan Green and some of the thought leaders in the field have done that. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anya, if you're here, do you have a question for our speaker?
Yes, Brent is in the metaverse and spatio. He said that he wanted to know what is the how does metformin help with longevity?
Okay. Metformin works with internetworking features. Metformin doesn't work specifically on mTOR like rapamycin does. Rapamycin is a very clean targeted drug. It to the best of our knowledge, it only works on one thing. Metformin's been around even longer than rapamycin, but people still can't agree on how it works. It modulates AMP kinase, upregulates that. Some people say it works through the gut by changing our gut microbiome, but as we saw from the graph I showed you, it appears to have synergistic effects with rapamycin, at least from that one study in mice at the ITP. So it works through different mechanisms, and but it's still underlying the same things with inflammation, with insulin resistance, with metabolic dysfunction. They appear to all be treating the same root cause in there.
Dr. Lufkin, we're being asked if we can share your QR code again for.
Yeah, sure. Let me pop it on the screen here.
There we go. And we'll leave that up for a few minutes. And while we do, I'll see if there are other questions here.
Yeah, I think you just point your phone at it and.
Here's it. While we have that up, a question from someone in our live stream.
Sure.
For many purposes, is a carbose only useful for people eating a low-fat, high-carb diet?
Good question. Acarbose, as we mentioned in the talk, is a diabetes drug, type 2 diabetes drug, and it works by blocking the absorption of carbohydrates in the gut. So one of its side effects is some people get gut dysfunction or diarrhea from taking it. But if I understand your question right, is if you're already on a low carb diet, do you get any benefit from taking acarbose? I think the answer is nobody knows really. The reason acarbose works is presumably by blocking the carb uptake. If you're not eating many carbs, then your benefit from acarbose would seem to be less, but nobody really knows for sure how it's working with its longevity effects, other than that dramatic study with that we saw with the ITP. So I don't know. I've experimented with acarbose myself. I'm on a low carb diet, but if I notice I'm eating something that has carbs in it or more carbs than I usually do, I might take some acarbose just for that purpose. So that might be a strategy you might want to use as well.
One final question on that note. Does acarbose require a prescription or do you have a suggested dose for that?
Yeah, acarbose is it's also a prescription. It's easier to get than rapamycin or probably even metformin. It's very, very low risk. It mainly acts in the gut. It's not absorbed appreciably, and it's I forget what the dosage is. One tablet, it's 0.25 milligrams, I think, but you take one or more PRN, so you kind of take it to your tolerance, and the tolerance is when people get GI disturbances, kind of. So, and some people do it just like as I said, they take it, in other words, for longevity applications, they take it whenever they eat. They have a meal that maybe has an inordinate amount of carbs on it.
Can I jump in here, Neal, with a question for the doctor?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Doctor, my mom has dementia, and I just finished reading, a few months ago, Dr. Bredesen's, Neal Bredesen, he was at UCLA.
Sure.
Yeah, and he's written this book called The End of Alzheimer's, and I'm following it with all his blood tests for myself and my mom. And one of the main things that everybody with Alzheimer's seems to get is insulin resistance of the brain. And so simply going to a high-fat diet seems to solve most of everything. And I have another good friend on here, John Ferber, who finds that sugars, extracellular, are like glue. They stiffen up everything, stiffen up the arteries, the heart, the joints. This glycation is horrible. So he's got this glycation breaking compound. And I found with my weightlifting, I get almost a 50% increase in what I can weightlift when I take his pills, which just breaks the extracellular glycation, not to mention the horrible things that carbohydrates do to the interior of the cell. I'm wondering, is it possible, is there any harm in having a high-fat diet other than the sugar industry lobbying Harvard professors to write papers against fat?
Is high fat, as long as it's, in my opinion, and this is a controversial opinion. There's a lot of disagreement about, some people still advocate a low fat diet for heart disease, which is a high sugar diet, unfortunately. I don't agree with that. And there's growing evidence showing that we shouldn't be eating that, and it's the cause of obesity and diabetes and all these other things. But that's a whole nother story. But in my opinion, it's okay to eat a high-fat diet if the fats are healthy fats. So healthy fats are saturated fats, animal fats, and you avoid unhealthy fats. Unhealthy fats are seed oils, trans fats, of course, polyunsaturated fats, mazola oil, corn oil, the canola oil that the American Heart Association says is heart healthy. I don't think it is. I think it's heart unhealthy, and you're better off having a butter or lard or any type of, if you're vegetarian, you can do avocado and coconut oil. Those are healthy fats for vegetarians also. It's not about carnivore or vegetarian.
Yeah, so it's the olive oil, fish oil, EPA, omega-3 oils, the MCT oils in coconut oil, palm kernel oil, and milk and cheese, particularly goat and sheep cheese, and
avocado oil also. Avocado oil. Yeah,
I remember there's 3 or 4 that are really good for you. And then, of course, if you eat fibers that are not digestible, starches that are not digestible, it makes ketones and ketone esters, beta hydroxybutyrate, which is the absolute best brain food you can get. And your brain uses 40% of your energy. So I'm wondering if anybody's studied yet a no carb diet and what effect that has on longevity.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way you can get to a no carb diet is a carnivore diet, essentially. But the
problem is excess protein is turned into, guess what? Sugar.
Yeah. What people do with the diets, basically what we recommend is you keep the macronutrients, keep the proteins constant, and just substitute fats for sugar. I mean, it makes for a high fat diet, but would you rather have a high carbohydrate diet, which is healthier?
But I think the fats themselves don't clog arteries. I think it's the inflammatory lectins, Dr. Gundry. We went into a low lectin diet, and my parents had to drop 2.5 of their 3 heart medicines, and they had to completely drop the cholesterol medicine because my triglycerides went from 192 to 47 like a teenager just by going to a low lectin diet. And I think, lectins are natural poisons that plants, cause you to have leaky gut, and leaky gut, so what do you know, causes inflammation and brain inflammation, brain barrier stuff. So, I see that working, but I'm glad to hear that you're in the camp of this high fat thing, that there really isn't a heart problem with a high fat diet, as long as they're good fats.
Yeah, the biggest risk factor for heart disease is diabetes, and you get diabetes from eating carbohydrates, type 2 diabetes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Thanks for everybody today. This has been great. Yeah.
Great presentation. Thank you very much. And I'll invite everyone who's in Zoom to stay with us as we have an after event. But I'd like to let you all know and remind you that this event has been recorded, and it is available after we close. It will through our YouTube channel, and there's a link at the top of our website for the YouTube channel. Next month, our service will be a hybrid, in-person and an in-Zoom meeting. That'll be on Thursday, May 25th at the regular time, open social hour at 6 p.m. and a formal presentation at 7 p.m. I'll update you later on this, and our speaker will be announced at our website shortly. I want to thank you for attending our meeting this month, and be sure to get our monthly email newsletter. Tell all of those that you love and all of those that you care for, to let them know about what's going on here at Perpetual Life. Invite them to watch our past services, which have been recorded. You can watch them now, and share with everyone that you care for. Thank you for coming to the Church of Perpetual Life.